Hello, our names are Jenna Johnson and Mona Kang, and today we'll be going over the federal regulations. Our objectives are to go over the function of regulations, to define 45 CFR 46. We'll go through the review process of an IRB or an institutional review board. We'll talk about when an additional review is required, and then we have a case study to cover.
So, starting with the function of federal regulations, historically it was created to prevent egregious medical experiments. So, an example of this was in the early 1970s, the Tuskegee syphilis study, where Black men were infected with syphilis to study its long term effects without informed consent being obtained by the researchers. Um, it prompted further federal regulations for the protection of human subjects in research. Along with the Belmont report also came the IRBs and the Common Rule, which we'll expand on later in this presentation. So what do these do? They act to protect human research subjects and regulate the appropriate review of experiments with their protection in mind. So the 45 CFR 46 is issued by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It serves to act as the primary federal policy for protecting human subjects in research. As the practices evolved, regulation was updated to strengthen protections for vulnerable populations with subpart A, B, C, and D. So any federal regulation that conducts or funds research must follow these regulations to ensure the rights of the research participants are protected. And the regulation also requires institutions to provide assurances accomplished to the Office of Human Research Protections, also known as the OHRP.
Within Subpart A, or the Common Rule, which was put out in 2017 as a revision of the 45 CFR 46, it established the basic federal requirements for protecting human subjects in research. These requirements include IRB review and approval, informed consent, and assurances of compliance. The revision was intended to strengthen protections for research participants while reducing administrative burden and providing more flexibility for modern research practices. The Common Rule also improves clarity in research for defining terms and identifying categories of research that may be exempt from IRB review. Institutions were required to comply with the revised Common Rule beginning in January 2019. There was additional updates made in 2018 to provide greater protections for vulnerable populations involved in research. These protections were outlined in several subparts. Subpart B provides additional safeguards for pregnant women, fetuses, and neonates. Subpart C addresses protections for prisoners, and Subpart D focuses on protections for children. These groups are considered vulnerable populations because they face increased risk or have limited ability to make fully independent decisions about research participation. These additional protections help ensure that these individuals can be included in research in an ethical and equitable manner.
So, an assurance with the office OHRP is a formal agreement that identifies the regulations an institution will follow to protect the human subjects in research. In the US, this is the Common Rule. So assurances only apply to studies that are funded or supported by a Common Rule department or an affiliated agency. The assurance will also identify the IRB that will be responsible for reviewing the research. So, an IRB is a committee that conducts the review to ensure the rights and the welfare of human research subjects are protected. They consist of five or more members who are diverse in terms of race, gender, and cultural background. They must also include one scientist, one non scientist, and at least one member who's not affiliated with the institution. In some cases, a single member can fulfill more than one of these requirements, and IRB members are expected to be sensitive to community attitudes, be knowledgeable and experienced with vulnerable populations, and be conversant with application to regulations, state and local laws, and standard of professional conduct. So they have several important responsibilities of approving or disapproving research. They can require modifications to secure approval for a research. They conduct continuing reviews after approval of an initial review, and they can suspend or terminate an approval. They also may observe or require a third party to observe the informed consent process and research procedures.
All right. What must be reviewed by the IRB is studies that meet the definition of research with human subjects. Under the common rule, research is defined as a systematic investigation. This can include activities such as research development, testing, evaluation, other structured methods of inquiry. Some activities that are not considered research under these regulations include certain scholarly and journalistic activities, public health surveillance activities, the collection and analysis of identifiable biospecimens or records for criminal justice purposes, and authorized intelligence, homeland security, defense, or national security activities. A human subject is defined as a living individual about whom a scientist is conducting research. There are several special circumstance reviews. The first one is an expedited review, which is a type of IRB review conducted by one or more IRB members designated by the IRB chair. To qualify for an expedited review, a study must meet the criteria of no more than minimal risk to the subject. Minimal risk is defined as risk that is no greater than ordinarily encounterable activities in daily life or during performance of routine physical or psychiatric exams. Another criteria that the study must only consist of one or more research activities specified in federal regulations. Examples include surveys, interviews, focus groups, observational of behavior, and the collection of biological samples or data through non-invasive procedures. Research may also qualify for expedited review when the primary risk is a breach of confidentiality, and that risk can be managed so that it remains no greater than minimal. If criteria is not met, then a convened review can be completed, which uses wider, more diverse groups to complete the review. This allows for the inclusion of additional perspectives in the decision-making process.
So the IRB approval is not the final step in the review process. Research studies remain subject to ongoing oversight after approval. So additional reviews can be conducted by other department heads, deans, or research directors. However, none of these institutional officials can overturn an IRB decision to disapprove a study. For research involving more than minimal risk, continuing reviews must be conducted at intervals appropriate to the degree of risk, and when required, they must be conducted at least once a year. Additional reviews are also conducted when changes are made to approved research plans or when unexpected problems involving risk to subjects occur. This is called filing an amendment, and it allows the IRB to ensure all the requirements from the initial review are still met. So this is a case study that we conducted on Henrietta Lacks. It focuses on the violation of the principle of informed consent. So in 1951, scientists collected her cervical cancer cells without her consent, and they were used to establish the HeLa cell line. Her cells were used to contribute to many medical breakthroughs, from research on the effects of zero gravity and outer space, and the development of polio and COVID-19 vaccines, to the study of leukemia, the AIDS virus, and cancer worldwide. So unlike the other like previous human cell samples that were collected, the HeLa cells were able to grow rapidly and continuously in the lab. This made them the first successful immortal cell line used for research outside the body. The case is considered controversial because Henrietta Lacks received free medical treatment, but she was never informed that her cells were being used for research. So after the HeLa cells were popularized, her family also received no financial benefit from it at all. Her case actually influenced the Common Rule in 1991 to inform the principle of informed consent. And today, researchers are required to inform participants about a study and obtain their agreement before participation, along with stronger protections for patient privacy.
In conclusion, human subjects research is guided by strict ethical and regulatory standards designed to protect participants. The IRB plays a central role in ensuring that studies are conducted ethically. Risks are minimized and informed consent is properly obtained. Overall, these protections exist to balance the advancement of science with the rights and safety of research participants. And then we have 5 questions. Question 1, why is there strict criteria for expedited review? What are some risks that the use of expedited review could create in an experiment that did not meet this criteria? Question 2, the Common Rule created additional flexibility for the modern research environment. What is an example of an experiment that required additional flexibility, and how did or would the Common Rule support this experiment? Question 3. Subparts B through D of 45 CFR 46 include additional protections for vulnerable subjects in experiments. What is an example of an experiment that requires the use of vulnerable subjects and the additional protections they may need for the study to be ethical? And then our 2 extra questions are, if Henrietta Lack cells were taken today under these exact regulatory definitions, would her case still be legally permissible? And if not, what would need to be changed to become permissible? Under 45 CFR 46, if a patient's identifiable information is removed from their tissue sample, it is no longer considered a human subject. If Henrietta Lack's cells were taken today and stripped of her name, would the hospital still be legally allowed to use them without her permission? If so, what would be some ethical considerations? And
And
then,
these are works cited.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.